Well, now, guys, is the transfer window now starting to heat up? Because Manchester City are really wanting Tino Livramento. However, Newcastle United remain firm on an asking price, and I hardly think Eddie Howe wants to lose one of his best defenders. We have made approaches for Elanga and Pedro with no replies yet from either club. However, it is believed that Brighton may have come down slightly on their valuation of João Pedro. Douglas Luiz may now be available from Juventus. Of course, Newcastle United have held a big interest in him over the last couple of seasons. And the shit show at Crystal Palace with regards to qualification for playing in Europe, they may be being thrown out. Does this pave the way and open the door slightly wider again for an approach for Mark Gahey? Let's have a look at it all, guys. Hi everybody and welcome to the Toon Review. My name's Paul. This is your latest Newcastle United news, and the big story this morning is about Tino Livramento and Manchester City making a real push to try and get him in. Initially it's thought that they wanted to sign Livramento before the Club World Cup. Of course, Pep Guardiola is looking for a replacement for Kyle Walker. He sees Tino Livramento as that perfect replacement, still young, hungry, and got years left, not even in his prime yet. However, it is believed that Eddie Howe does not want to sell Tino Livramento, and that's pretty obvious. Why on earth would we? And we are remaining very strong on the asking price. We're not budging. Man City are believed to have wanted to come down on the price. We're not moving, and rightly so. And it's nice to see us sticking to our guns regarding valuation fees. However, the valuation that seems to be banded around for Tino Livramento is 32 million quid. Now, I don't know about you guys out there, but I think that's a little low. You know what I mean? For a guy who's played for England, he's got years left, not even in his prime, as I say, and he's valued at 32 million. I would have thought it would be upwards of maybe 40, 45. If we're talking about what other players, English players, have been valued around the Premier League, then surely Tino Livramento has to be up there. Of course, the ability to play on the left-hand side as well will be appealing to Pep Guardiola. You know, he's versatile. He's a fantastic fullback. And many people said that he actually played better when he was moved to the left last season than what he did starting on the right-hand side. But listen, Man City will make a push for him. There's no doubt about that. Now, are they going to wait now until after the Club World Cup? I'm sure Pep wanted him in before there so he can bed him into the system and the club before the holidays start and pre-season, of course. However, it's not likely to happen. And I'm really pleased that it's not likely to happen. But I am wary that Manchester City may come back in once the window reopens and this Club World Cup gets out the way. Because once Pep sets his eye on a player, he tends to go and get them. And the pull of Manchester City may be appealing to Tino Livramento. I don't know. We haven't heard anything from the player himself. But one thing is for sure, Eddie Howe does not want to lose one of his best defenders. No way. He played a big part in our qualification for the Champions League last season when, of course, he stepped onto the left-hand side for the injury to Lewis Hall, and he was absolutely fantastic. Played a massive part in us winning the Carabao Cup, of course, putting that cross in for Jacob Murphy to pull back for Isak. So, listen, he's a big favourite with the fans, Tino Livramento, and I think this is a worry when we see a club like Manchester City really make a push for a player. But like I say, I'm really pleased to see that Newcastle United are really taking a hard stance with this and not being pushed around by Manchester City. Manchester City are going to be our rivals next season. Touch wood. They will be our rivals at the top end of the Premier League. So why on earth would anyone think that we'd sell Tino Livramento to one of our rivals? It makes no sense at all. And yes, we could go and get a replacement. That happens in football. But it's the problem of finding a replacement that is as good as Tino Livramento. Now, be aware, Eddie Howe's brought this guy on leaps and bounds since we signed him. And has really made, Tino's made great progress under the guidance of Eddie Howe. But it has to worry people that Man City is sniffing around. Eddie will stand very firm on this, and that's what generally comes across very strongly in all the media reports, is that there's no way Eddie Howe wants to sell. And certainly not before the Club World Cup. That would have to be a very quick deal, and Newcastle United aren't prepared to do that. I'm really happy we're taking a stance with Manchester City, but Whether this takes any traction after the Club World Cup and Manchester City come in with another offer for Tino Livramento, we'll have to keep an eye on it. But if we did accept an offer, then I really am confused as to what is going on at Newcastle United. We need to keep our best players, and certainly Tino Livramento is right up there as one of our best defenders at the club, and we don't want to lose him, especially to a rival like Manchester City. Now, obviously, we know that Newcastle United's interest in Elanga and João Pedro at Brighton, they've been sort of pushed to the forefront lately after Mbeumo going to Manchester United, etc. And it seems to me that Newcastle have really targeted Elanga for this right-hand side. Now, Craig Hope and various other reporters have said that Newcastle have now made official approaches for these players. Pedro at Brighton was initially valued by their club at £100 million. We spoke about this many times in our live shows, saying that is outrageous. Yes, he's a very, very good player, João Pedro, but they bought him for 30. They're looking to recoup, 70 million more than what they paid for him? That's ludicrous. Now, it is led to believe that Brighton have come down in price to around 30 million quid. That, to me, would seem a bit more fair, a decent price for João Pedro. Now, of course, whether Bruno Guimaraes gets involved in this, very good friends with João Pedro, of course, can he try and influence him to come to Newcastle? There's been no replies from Forest or Brighton as I record this, so that may change later on in the day. It may be early next week. We don't know. But obviously, there's only a couple of days left before we take a 6-day break of the transfer window, and then it all kicks off and opens up again, and then PSR regulations come into play. So there's a lot to go on in this transfer window, but I think, judging by this, certainly Anthony Elanga is the target that Newcastle want to replace, to come in on the right-hand side. Now, that excites me. I've said it before. I think I was a little bit taken aback that Mbeumo went to Manchester United. Maybe going to Manchester United. However, Anthony Elanga is rapid. He's a very, very good player, and I think will combine with Alexander Isak brilliantly. I think Isak would love having Elanga at the club. Apparently, they've had telephone conversations now, and it's good that you can see our players actively working behind in the background, trying to convince their mates to join Newcastle United. It is quite exciting. And I think after all the rigmarole of hearing about extended contracts and things like that the other day, I think we're now turning to a possibility of really ramping it up in the transfer window. Whether anything happens before it closes for a week on the 10th, I don't think we're going to get anything done by then. But there may be a lot going on in the background ready for the reopening of the window on the 16th or 17th, whenever it is. So still very exciting, but Elanga probably around £42 million. Pedro, as I say, 60 million. I think those two would be fantastic signings. But with this, if we do go and get João Pedro, does this mean that Eddie Howe is maybe looking at changing the formation for next season? Of course, we said many, many times during the poor games of Newcastle United, maybe that the 4-3-3 had just been found out a little bit and we needed to maybe try and change things. But Eddie didn't have the players in order to change the formation or tinker with the tactics too much. But João Pedro offers a lot more. He's a very, very good player in attacking midfield. He can play as a striker. He can play out wide. So he gives Eddie a lot more options to maybe tinker with the formation. So obviously, it's an exciting one to keep an eye on. Now, Douglas Luiz is a player that Newcastle United have been very, very interested in the past, and Juventus have announced that they will probably listen to offers for Luiz. Now, the valuation is around 30 to 40 million pounds, but now we have to say, do we really need a Douglas Luiz in our squad? And I know he's a quality player. He hasn't really hit the heights at Juventus, to be fair, and that's why Juventus are probably looking at offers for him. But is he really somebody now that we could see coming in? Who would he replace? Where would he play? You've got Tonali in there who does a fantastic job in defensive midfield. You've got Bruno, of course. You've got Joe Linton, Lewis Miley. Who is really Douglas Luiz going to come in for? And would he get regular football? Now, these are the questions that all the players that are linked with Newcastle United, and certainly if we approach any, are going to be asking that question because they all want to play football. They're all going to be certainly not happy with just playing a bit part. Now, we've got lots of games next season, obviously, and rotation is going to be very, very important, as we keep saying. So that means that the players that will come in, the whole squad will get a lot of games next season, judging by how many we're going to be playing. And the pull of the Champions League, of course, means a lot for a lot of players. And Douglas Luiz, of course, he's been in the Premier League. He knows it inside out. Would he be a bad signing? I'm not so sure. Is he overvalued at 38 to 40? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below as to where he might fit into the club. But, there's an option there. Now, Vlahovic is obviously, as well, Juventus have announced that they will listen to offers for him. There's no interest from Newcastle United at the moment, unfortunately, in Vlahovic. So I don't know whether that one has any traction or not. Of course, Newcastle's name has been mentioned with him during this transfer window, but certainly nothing concrete, nothing really official from even the Northeast journalists saying that we're interested in Vlahovic. And to be honest, when Isak's there, it's not like we can really budge on Isak to bring in Vlahovic. It would be fantastic, of course, to have two absolute elite strikers, but I don't see that one happening. Now, finally, Palace are in real trouble of being disqualified from the Europe competitions, of course, after something going on with their owners and shares and things like that. I didn't really read much into it, to be honest. My main concern was, of course, if they do get thrown out of Europe, that means that it probably opens the door a little wider to make the approach for Mark Gahey. Now, this was a big story yesterday that Newcastle United were ready to push for Gahey. The three players that they really wanted in were Gahey, Pedro and Elanga. So would this open the door again for Newcastle United to say, right, well, obviously Palace will not have Europe next season. That isn't confirmed, by the way. They're still fighting the battle, and rightly so. I feel really sorry for the Palace fans, actually, in this whole thing. They've never won anything. They've won the FA Cup, an opportunity to be in Europe, and now it looks like there's all this shit behind the scenes which may see them thrown out of the competition. I feel so sorry for the Palace fans. I really do, because we know what it's like. We won the Carabao Cup after 70 years, the euphoria. It's a real shame. However, on the footballing side, Mark Gahey may then turn around and say, right, well, obviously Newcastle are in the Champions League. We're not in Europe at all. That might just give him the extra push if Newcastle United do make an approach. But it's certainly interesting, and it certainly seems, guys, that the things are starting to happen now. Things are starting to rotate. The wheel is turning. Now, as to say we get them in before the 10th, I don't think we get anybody in before the 10th now. I'm more looking to when the window reopens in 6-7 days' time, 16th or 17th of June, whenever that is. And then, of course, you've got the PSR restriction deadline. That's going to be interesting to see if Newcastle swoop in on any clubs that have to sell due to PSR. Rumours are Morgan Rogers, of course, at Aston Villa. They will need to sell. A couple of other clubs. So there's a lot of exciting things to come, I still think, in this transfer window, and a lot still to be optimistic about, despite the fact that we haven't signed any first teamers yet. Of course, Cadero's come in and looks a decent guy, to be honest, but I think he'll be out on loan. But keep the faith, guys, is all I can say at the minute, because it's starting to happen and we're starting to make inroads into bringing players in. But as usual, let me know in the comments below what you think of it all. Thank you very much for watching. As usual, if you have enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button, guys. Very important to the channel. And of course, if you're new, please do subscribe. We're on the way to 40,000 subscribers. Never thought I'd ever say that. So if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button. It is completely free. But do make sure you hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload like this or one of our live shows. And of course, check out the website, thetoonreview.com, for all your merchandise. But that's it for now, guys. We'll see you very soon. Take care.